Well, greetings again, everyone. I'm Dr. Matt Ayars, president of Wesley Biblical Seminary. During the Lenten season, we take time to pause and reflect with the help of the Holy Spirit guiding our hearts to think about sin and to get at the root of sin. To be people who take holiness seriously and salvation and redemption seriously, we also have to be people who take sin seriously. We have to understand what it is and even what it isn't. If we don't have a good understanding of sin or a right biblical understanding of sin, then our thinking about what it means to be a Christian, what it means to be saved, and what Jesus is doing at the cross can become a bit twisted. And so what I want to do is talk very briefly about, well, what is sin? There's a lot of different ways to approach this question, what is sin? Most of the time, as contemporary Christians, we think of sin as doing things that we ought not to do. We think of the 10 Commandments. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. We don't do those things and we won't be sinning. And that's true. Those are what we call sins of commission, when we do things that we ought not to do. But there's another category of sin, and those are called sins of omission. And this is where we fail to do the things that we ought to do. In the Old Testament, specifically in Moses' law, God speaks to the people and says, when you have a field and you're growing wheat in that field, leave the edges of the field. Don't collect, don't harvest all of the field. Leave some for the orphans and the widows, the disenfranchised, the poor, so that they have something to eat. Or even when you're harvesting the field and picking up and bundling your wheat, don't go back and pick up all the pieces that you dropped behind you. Leave those for the poor so that they have something to eat. Failure to obey those commands is also sin. So not doing something that we ought to do, a sin of omission. The greatest of these, Jesus gives us in the New Testament, is love. When we fail to love our neighbor, even when we fail to love our enemies, Jesus says the greatest command is love God and love neighbor. When we don't love our neighbors, we are sinning. Jesus even goes as far as to say, pray for your enemies. When we don't pray for our enemies, we're sinning. When he says, you are to pray like this. So if we don't pray, we are sinning. And so sin isn't just things that we do that we ought not. Sin is also not doing the things that we're supposed to do. Jesus famously talks about himself saying, when I was in prison, you didn't visit me. And when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was poor and naked, you didn't clothe me. In other words, when we don't serve the poor, we are sinning. We're living in open rebellion against God and his commands. So far, we've talked about sin in terms of behaviors, things that we ought not to do that we do, or things that we ought to do that we fail to do. But sin goes yet further than this. Sin isn't just about the things that we do externally in our lives. Sin is also internal. Our thoughts can be sinful. Our attitudes can be sinful. And even our emotions can be sinful. Jesus says, even the one who looks upon a woman in lust is in sin. That's a thought. An attitude, he who has pride in his heart. For many years, I served in Haiti, and I willingly served in Haiti as a missionary, but it was hard, it was hot, everything was exotic and different. I'm a homebody, I don't like to travel, and it was just hard for my personality. And God really convicted me one day and said, yes, you're being obedient and that you're serving in Haiti, but you have a bad attitude. Your attitude doesn't honor me. Honor your father and your mother. That's another attitudinal heart posture command. So our thoughts, our attitudes, and even our emotions. This is a tricky one because we tend to think that our emotions are natural because oftentimes we can't control them. They're just a natural reaction or response. That makes me happy. That makes me sad. That makes me angry. But Jesus even teaches that our emotions need to come under his lordship. That when we're angry or upset at someone, that we need to let that go and forgive. So sin is not just the things that we do that we ought not, or not just the things that we don't do that we ought, but also our thoughts, our attitudes, and our emotions. And so during this Lenten season, we focus, with the help of the Holy Spirit, in an intensified devotional life to root out sin. The Holy Spirit is the light that illuminates. He can show us the places in our lives where our attitudes need adjusted. Certain emotions need uprooted and replaced with other emotions. Anger replaced with joy. Hate replaced with love. and even some of our thoughts that are impure that we can take captive and submit to Jesus so that we can be free from sin. And there's our theme, freedom. So that's right thinking about sin. We have more lessons on sin to come. God bless you as we continue on in Lent.